Audience, welcome to Viewpoint from Overseas. This is your host, Misbah Azam. With me, our own Riaz Haq and Sabahat Ashraf. We are today going to do the 2080 review and see different stages, what is going on in the world, different parts of the world, US politics, Pakistan, India politics, Afghanistan politics, and what is happening inside US and inside Pakistan with vis-a-vis President Trump, vis-a-vis Prime Minister Imran Khan, and so on. So first of all, I would start with Riaz. Riaz, tell me how you see, let's begin with US politics. How you see from the January 1st, 2018 to December 31st, 2018, how you see the American politics, which direction it went from where to where?
Yeah, I think the situation in the United States has never been as chaotic as it is today, or as it has been this year. And part of it is the way President Trump makes his decisions. Is it doesn't really have a process. He's very off the cuff. I think one of the indications of chaos is the number of people who have left the administration or been fired or replaced. Key positions like the Chief of Staff position is open right now. The Defense Secretary position is open. I mean, these are critical positions. The National Security Advisor was fired. They brought a new one in. So there's been a great deal of flux. And then this decision to withdraw without much warning from Syria really precipitated things. And now there are rumors that Donald Trump has decided already to withdraw from Afghanistan. It just hasn't been disclosed or communicated yet, but it is expected that it will be made formal, this announcement of withdrawal next year. The only thing that I see possible that may happen is sometimes what they do is that when they don't agree with the decisions, the people in, let's say, different departments, for example, in this case, the Pentagon, they basically slow walk those decisions. Like the Syria decision, they're not all pulling out at once. They're actually doing it very slowly over a period of time. They may do the same thing in Afghanistan as well. But in the end, they have to pull out because that's what the president has ordered.
How you see the impact of the midterm elections in US?
I think we don't know what the impact is because the Congress hasn't really, taken its place yet. It's going to start in the beginning of next year. And we don't know how. I think there's a lot of disagreements within the Democratic Party as to how to proceed. Some of them want to just investigate everything, basically call all the departments and ask them questions and go into their workings, while others are arguing that hey, it's time to impeach the president. So we'll see what route they take. But, I think Democrats have to settle from within the party as to what is it that they want to do. First of all, who the leadership is going to be. It's very likely that the leadership will not change, that Nancy Pelosi will continue as a leader and will become the next Speaker of the House. But there could be, infighting within the Democratic Party in terms of the far left, the progressive wing of the party, and the more moderate wing of the party as to how aggressively to pursue President Trump and his administration.
Sabahat.
Yeah, so on the American side, what I would say is that 2018, let's put that in context. 2018 is the second year of President Trump's tenure. It was an election year. A midterm election has a specific role in American politics. And these 2 years, particularly 2018, you could say have been a stress test for the American political system, the whole system. Mm-hmm. And I was actually listening to something on NPR yesterday where they said what a lot of people outside the US often don't get is that even in the worst of times, the American system remains. You know, when we talk about often third world countries and other countries where if a president is removed or the head of government is in a bad place, then the whole system comes under stress. There is much more chaos, to use Yasab's word, or much more uncertainty in the whole system than there is in the American system. Like when Nixon was removed, foreign policy basically didn't change. Things didn't go anywhere. There were still, you know, the deep state, for want of a better phrase, or the institutions kept moving, and policies kept going. So, but that was before Trump. Nixon's removal was the biggest uncertainty, at least what you'd say in the modern age, in the second half of the 20th century, post-war period, whatever you want to say. Mr. Trump is an even bigger stress test. So at one level, 2018 was the end of that period where the Republicans had control of all three forms of government, yet Donald Trump, slowly towards the end of the year, is starting to liberate himself from the Republican Party. The Republican Party is slowly starting to pull itself back from being completely in sync with him. And some of that is a function of the midterm elections. The Democrats are now going to have control of Congress, so the Republicans are like stepping back and saying, okay, you do what you're going to do. So you can look at 2018 in two parts. One is where the Republicans and Donald Trump and what they were doing. And towards the end, you get into the part where it's actually a process of setting the stage for 2019. 2019 is the year when basically by about January 15th, 3 weeks from now, 2 weeks from now, the 2020 presidential election will start formally. Yeah. I mean, the one or two candidates on the Democratic side who have declared their intention are going to start filing fundraising reports, and you know, things will start to shake out. And on the one hand, you will have the Democrats, you know, throwing their weight around, which they've already started in Congress. On the other hand, in parallel to that, the dynamics of having a bunch of senators, particularly, and a lot of other people running for presidential election and posturing appropriately will also start. And then on top of that, you have what Riyasa was saying, that Congress will do something it has not done in a long time, which is fulfill its oversight responsibilities, which is asking the administration, the various departments for accountability, what is going on. And so that will start to happen. It didn't happen, and as a lot of us would think, the Republicans completely dropped the ball on that. Part of it is that parties don't let go or reduce their support for a president of their party unless that president becomes a liability for them politically, which Donald Trump might be getting to now. So there's that. On the international level and the actual
Afghanistan and
Syria, mm-hmm. Donald Trump had always said, even as a candidate, that he wants to pull out from Afghanistan. And I guess because he couldn't, and he's not the kind of person that works through the system, so instead of working through the system, he suddenly just got up and announced, we're going to do this. And as Riaz Saab said, the system and the deep state there's going to be a level of inertia in that whole process of pulling out. So Syria, America wasn't officially in Syria anyway. This was started out as a small, special operations and advisory role to anti-ISIS situations. So he pretty much said, we're pulling these guys out. That will happen slowly, first of all. Secondly, whether we like it or not, the simple fact is that Assad has won the civil war in Syria. So now where does all of that happen? But it has opened up the Kurdish territories. Turkey will now play a bigger role in that area. America is pulling back. in terms of Afghanistan, which is more relevant to our immediate, most of our viewership, Afghanistan, with America drawing down in Afghanistan, and especially giving off the vibe of drawing down in Afghanistan, Pakistan's role in Afghanistan becomes more critical, because Pakistan has always played a certain role and has proxy situations. So at one level, crudely speaking, you could say that India will become less important, Pakistan will become more important. So that whole thing will happen. This will have effects for Pakistani politics and Pakistani situation.
Yeah.
Then so on. And I don't know how much you want to discuss the Pakistani scene in
we will come. You guys already touched a little bit Syria, but my next question would be the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, Turkish and Turkish army at the borders of the Kurdi, of the quote-unquote Kurdistan, whatever. How you see that, all these things?
Yeah, I think the signal, the Syrian pullout, basically is sort of a signal to the entire region. It could mean fairly big changes in the region. One of the things that I expect, by the way, this is one area where the American pullout from Syria is where Israelis are not happy either. They wanted the Americans to remain there because now they see that the Iranian influence will only grow. And one of the concerns I have is this kind of an inconsistency in Trump's policy. On the one hand, Trump wants to squeeze Iran, and on the other hand, he's basically leaving Syria, where basically leaving a vacuum that will only be filled by Iran. So one of the worries I have is that once he has pulled out and the Iranian influence grows, there may be more pressure in the United States, particularly from the Israeli lobby, to go after Iran and basically take some more punitive actions against Iran. So we'll see how that affects it. And Saudis obviously would support any action that the United States and Israel want to take against
Future
Iran.
of Saudi king. Not king, MBS, I mean.
I think MBS is probably, I think these people are all disposable as far as the United States is concerned. So, at some point they're going to say, is this guy becoming more of a liability than an asset?
They get rid of him.
To push for a change there.
Yeah, Sabat.
So the Middle East, let's actually take a step back and discuss for half a minute or a minute what actually is happening in the Middle East. I think, and actually ISIS was the first entity to come out and declare that what is really happening in the Middle East is that the post-World War I scenario, because of the shape of the Middle East, the countries, the
post-World War I scenario of Europe, you mean?
No,
or Middle East?
I mean the Middle East, the shape of Syria, the shape of Iraq.
It's talking about Sykes-Picot.
After that,
Sykes-Picot of the Middle East. Because the Middle East, today's Middle East, the countries, the structures were kind of, initially, the borders and structures were set up after World War I.
After the Ottoman Empire.
After the Ottoman Empire collapsed.
That's true.
And the Europeans took over.
Yeah, then Balfour Declaration and all those things.
That overall structure was reset a little bit, first of all, because there was some push and pull after World War I where, the French and the British went back and forth and they made some promises, then didn't keep the promises and all of that. So there was some rearrangement there. And then in the post-World War II world, during the Cold War particularly, there was another restructure, not of the shape and boundaries, but of the political dispensations. So the monarchies fell, and then these authoritarian dictators like Saddam Hussein and the Assads and in Egypt, all of that came about. And that whole, both of those things, the whole structure is now coming apart, and a new Middle East is emerging, right? That graphic from a few years ago where ISIS put out a video literally showing that the border between Syria and Iraq was being erased by bulldozers. That was an iconic thing that happened. And the next thing that has happened in 2018 is with Donald Trump pulling the Americans out of Syria. Now, Turkey's role in that region is more open. And the other thing that has happened through 2018 is that the old rivalry, post-World War and to some extent before it, the rivalry between the Turkish power in that region, the non-Arab powers, and you can even think about the fact that Iran and Turkey are both non-Arab powers, and then a major Arab power, which right now is kind of defined by the Gulf Cooperation Committee, or basically the alliance around Saudi Arabia. That has started to feel its oats and come into its own. So 2018 was a period of setting up, again, that tension. And what happens in 2019 to some extent will depend on that. And as Riyasa pointed out, it's not, even given so many variables that all of us are not so used to dealing with, even within that, not all priorities go in the same direction. On the one hand, as Riyasa pointed out, America, not just Donald Trump, but before that, has always had this, at least since the late 70s, had this tension with Iran. But on the other hand, pulling out of Syria gives Iran a freer hand there, but then pulls Turkey in. So that whole situation is going to get even more interesting, almost, to the day exactly 100 years since World War I ended.
World War I. Riaz, so let us get back to the region where we all belong to, Pakistan. Okay, so I kind of designed the question a little bit wide, in a wide spectrum here. So I would like you both gentlemen's opinion. Pakistan's internal politics vis-a-vis Afghanistan. What is going on in Afghan election? Please include that also. How it is happening, which is already delayed now until July at least. Then India-Pakistan relation and how India and Pakistan. We will talk about it. What happened in 2019 in our last 5 minutes of the show. So just current situation and what you saw change from January 1st, 2018 to December 30th, 2018. But one thing I would like to mention here, that our friend and our old colleague, I would say, because he is invited in our show time to time, Dr. Adil Najam, a famous scholar in Pakistan, he accepted to be the part of the Prime Minister's 19-member foreign policy team, which is advisory council. It's not a team, which is being headed by the Foreign Minister of Pakistan, Mr. Shah Mahmood Qureshi. Okay, Riaz, go ahead, please. Pakistan internal. Start with Pakistan internal politics, elections, how you see it. Then after that, what happened, just tell. And then please comment on Afghanistan issue and vis-a-vis Pakistan.
I think Pakistan went through some major changes in 2018 in terms of the security situation, in terms of politics. In terms of security situation, the downward trend in terrorist violence continued. The number of fatalities from terror incidents in Pakistan declined to an all-time low of about 600, down from about 1,300 the year before. So it's a big, that trend is continuing, and that's a good thing. It allowed elections to be held relatively peacefully, although there's a lot of people who are unhappy with the way it was conducted and the results of the election. But the fact is that the elections went ahead, were carried out, and PTI emerged as the single largest party and then formed the coalition government that is headed by Prime Minister Imran Khan now. So it's a good thing that the political process is continuing, although there is a lot of accusations and allegations and conspiracy theories about how it all happened. In terms of relations with India, I think Prime Minister Imran Khan made his peace overtures. He wanted to have friendship with India, extended a hand of friendship. Initially, Prime Minister Modi accepted, and then he changed his mind. because he saw the elections coming up, and he thought that that might not be helpful under pressure from, his own party not to go forward with it. Then we saw what happened in the Indian elections. We saw that Prime Minister Modi's party, there were 5 states that held state elections, and the BJP, Prime Minister Modi's party, did not win in any of those 5 elections. In fact, they lost very badly. The numbers.
3, yes, that's true. 3
of those states, the biggest
Congress
states, which are very important states, particularly the states of Rajasthan and Madhya Pradesh. Those are very important states. So I think that what happens next in terms of the Modi's policy would probably be driven by the elections again, because they have the national elections coming up next year. In terms of Afghanistan, we know that there is strong rumors that Mr. Trump is ready to pull out. And if that were to happen, I think it throws the whole Afghan situation in a big question mark in terms of what happens. In fact, there is a lot of concerns in both India and Pakistan about the aftermath of the American pullout. There may be more chaos, and then in Afghanistan, most likely the winners in the end are going to be Taliban. How the Taliban are going to behave is going to be basically what determines what happens next in Afghanistan. The elections probably, I don't know if they're going to happen. If the Americans announce they're going to pull out, and the Afghan government and the people that are in charge right now, they get discouraged or disheartened, become pessimistic, they may just decide to run away instead of face the fight with the Taliban. Because I think the only thing that keeps this government, Karzai's government in.
You mean Ghani's
government? Yeah, Ghani's government in is basically the American support. Lack of that support. See, one of the concerns is the Americans won't just pull out the troops; they may actually stop the money flow. Mm-hmm. And Afghanistan's economy basically will collapse without the American money coming in. So those are some of the things that I see, that are happening at the end of the year 2018.
Yes. So first of all, I'd like to really thank Riaz for laying out the facts. He's done a really good job of laying out both for Pakistan, India, Afghanistan. We should also, for our region, also touch briefly Bangladesh.
Yes.
And then, of course, next to Bangladesh, semi in South Asia, we have Burma, which is not directly related, but I'll come back to that. But now that we have the facts on the table, what I'd like to do is take it to the next level and do a bit, because this is the end of the year, this is a good time to do a status check or a term report on how governance and governments and society is evolving in each of these countries. I mean, even India, which we don't, India we think of as a long-term stable democracy to a large extent. But in fact, let me start from there. Because I had one friend particularly, Mr. Madan out in New Jersey, who grew up in Rajiv's India. And our generation sort of came of age during Rajiv's time. And Rajiv Gandhi's time. And since then, we've had, because after Indira Gandhi died, India went through a major milestone where, in the post-independence period, they had practically a democratic one-party state kind of thing going. But since Rajiv Gandhi is passing away, things have started to evolve to the next level where we have opposition parties, other parties taking rule. And in that parallel, their right of center party, or you could say neo-conservative or however you want to characterize the BJP and that whole Sanghi, what in India is called the Sangh Parivar, their political party has come of age. It has gone through a whole couple of governments, and they've won an election. And in that regard, it is important to note that those 5 regional elections Riaz Saab mentioned that we had this year, the people actually voted against the BJP. And by the way, the one state, I'm blanking on the name, I think Mizoram or somewhere, where the Congress was in power, they were voted out of office. So basically the Indian electorate did a anti-incumbency kind of role, which is a very good sign for the evolution of a democracy, where people are now judging. We've gotten to the stage where governments are being judged according to their performance and pulled out.
Pretty much like Khyber Pakhtunkhwa in Pakistan.
Right. Now let's come to Pakistan that way. So for India, it's a very positive thing to see. And in Pakistan now we come to the same thing. Pakistan is, of course, much earlier in its evolution. This is only the third democratic government in a row. And much as we want to discuss Imran Khan as a big change, and that is a big change. Imran Khan, one thing we have to also acknowledge is that Imran Khan's 20 to 25 year quest for becoming prime minister finally came to fruition. He got a chance to participate. And in terms of a term report, they did a lot of U-turns, there's a lot of uncertainty, but especially by the end of the year, we are starting to see some really positive things. I mean, even down to the level of even the last month or so, we've seen a lot of these comments and reports on social media about how the citizens portal that they have set up, where people can make complaints about government, and that's starting to yield results. People are saying, oh, I had this problem, it got solved, and that problem. So there's that. Then there is, they're starting to put in their own structures. They did the whole economic work where they were, they kind of used their heft about anti-IMF to leverage other financial help from other sources. That's actually, much as we might think that Saudi Arabia and the UAE and all are not very good partners to have, but they use that to solve the problem, control the problem in their own way, for their own ideology. So they've done that. And towards the end of the year, we are now seeing that they're starting to put in some of those structures that you mentioned. For example, on foreign policy, they have made this, what I would call a brain trust, so an advisory council that governments have, on which they have pulled in Dr. Adil Najam, who's a non-partisan intellectual. Not exactly a Pakistani intellectual, because his day job is usually in Boston.
Yes, you're right.
But
he's American.
But he's a Pakistani American, but he's a very engaged, very involved Pakistani intellectual. And for my money, one of the most serious Pakistani intellectuals today. And he has spent time working as the Vice Chancellor of LUMS in Lahore. So he's very engaged. And then there are the other names on that commission are Ashraf Jahangir Qazi, other senior people from the foreign policy establishment. So these are good signs to see the evolution of both the government itself and of governance. Because now, for example, Shahbaz Sharif got the chance to actually preside over the Public Accounts Committee, which, by the way, is a continuation of something that was put in place under the PPP government, where by ex officio now, the leader of the opposition is the head of the Public Accounts Committee, which is a very interesting structure in Pakistan. So, and in that is where I would like to bring it back, that we also have to see this as the evolution and further stabilization of Pakistani democracy. Now, and I know I also feel that way, other people would also say that we took one more step forward coming out of the corrupt politicians towards a less corrupt government. But on the other hand, in terms of the independence of the military, of the civilian government from the security state, I think on balance, I think most people would say we took half a step backwards in that regard.
Okay.
Which brings us to Afghanistan. Yeah. And Afghanistan... Yeah. I think whatever happened in 2018, which I think we also have to look at the fact that, whether we like it or not, 2018 was a period also of the Taliban slowly making gains. They are in control of more of the country, if I am not wrong. And on the other hand, we now have had 2 elections. The Ghani government has done work. What happens on the other side, especially with America drawing down? I know Afghan friends are worried that the Ghani government might not be yet, and that whole setup, the regime, if you want to call it, or the structure is not strong enough to hold back against the Taliban once they start to rise. And then, of course, if Pakistan starts to throw its weight behind its proxies, it could get problematic. So it's going to be a dicey year for Afghanistan. Let's see what happens in that period. And then Pakistan's role, India's role, increasingly China's role in that region and Russia from the other side, it's going to be a dicey year.
Yeah. So we have only 3 minutes left. So let's confine ourselves to US and Pakistan at this time. US, what is going to happen as far as Mr. Trump is concerned? Just one-liner, and then I will go to him. Then I will ask other question. What will happen to President Trump?
I think it's unlikely that he would be removed or impeached. I think he will continue in office, although he would meet a lot of resistance in Congress because the Democrats will not allow him to continue to do things that he has been trying to do. There'll be challenges to him not only in Congress but also in the courts, continuing challenges to his authority. So there's going to be a lot of checks on what he can or cannot do. In terms of Pakistan, I expect that...
I'll come back to that.
Yeah.
So, President Trump impeached.
In terms of Trump, I don't think he will be impeached, but I have to caveat that. Because now, especially with the presidential election coming up and the primary season starting in America, the Democrats are going to be focused on, because they'd rather run against a damaged Trump than have to take on someone who could run on his own. So there's going to be that dynamic. But on the other hand, if something, because Mr. Mueller is about to put out, it seems like he'll put out a report sometimes this year. And if that is a very clear, case.
In 2019, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're hearing rumors about March. Which is coming up pretty fast. And then beyond that, it could happen later. So that, if it is a very clear report that even the Republicans cannot really push back against, and they start to see because Trump's support is also reducing because of what he has done with troops, what he has done with farm subsidies and all of, how these trade wars are affecting farmers and all of that. So if he becomes a liability, then all bets are off. I mean, then something could happen. In fact, the Republicans might want to replace him with someone they can work with sooner. So let's see.
So in Pakistan, what will happen to the internal politics? What will happen to Mr. Sharif and Mr. Zardari?
Yeah, I think obviously the accountability process is going to step up against Mr. Zardari. There's a lot of reports out in terms of his level of corruption, involvement in money laundering, fake bank accounts, and how the money was being moved overseas from Pakistan through those bank accounts. So I think they're going to pursue that. The issue is going to be that they're going to need the cooperation of the government of Sindh, the officials in Sindh government. And that may become a problem unless they declare what is called a financial emergency. No, not governor's rule. Not necessarily. Governor's rule is only going to be for a limited period. If they do that. And then they have to obviously, restore the government or hold elections again. But the financial emergency, that does not have to be limited to a certain amount of time. This is under Article 35 of the Constitution that allows the president, in his discretion and his judgment, to impose a financial emergency on either the entire country or parts of the country where they see a lot of financial mismanagement going on. So what that does is financial emergency allows the president to take over how the money is spent. And if they take away that power from the Sindh government, that basically limits a lot of what they can do.
Okay. Sabah.
Interesting. Again, as I was saying earlier, and I covered this a little, there is the evolution that is happening. The Imran Khan government is again going through its own cycle of, because they set up the government a certain way, but now it's shaking out. We have these advisory bodies coming in. They also appointed, for example, a gentleman I know called Javed Hassan to the National Vocational Training Board, or whatever the advisory body is, NAB-TTC. That kind of thing will get into the serious period where they have to try to fulfill their promises, right? That's the government. On the other hand, this accountability process is now still gaining momentum. It's moving along. The government is saying, hey, we have nothing to do with it. They're independent. On the other hand, the rumors and the impression often is that there is, it's selective justice. And as we often say, selective prosecution is not justice, it's persecution. So there's that matter. However, cases are being brought, people have gone to jail, the system is evolving that way. So let's see how that happens. And it's sad that up to now, we've not discussed the fact that the murder of Sayyid Ali Raza Abdi in Karachi will make Karachi a little tense. It is a little tense right now. Where that goes, and that the financial emergency, things like that, will that give the central government and the president?
Yes, not just Ali Raza. I think there were 3 murders within a week.
Right. PSP 2 of the PSP.
Right.
And they're all MQM people.
Yes.
Right. So here is the point. Yes, there were 3 murders.
Former MQM.
Absolutely right. There was more than one murder. But then murders also happened. We've had a lot of very heinous tragedies.
No, but these 3 murders happened a week after.
That's correct.
After Altaf Hussain spoke, he sent out his
that's
video.
What I'm saying.
In that video, he basically called upon his supporters to go and take out these people.
Right. Yeah. But on the other hand, the Ali Raza Abdi murder is special because it's much more prominent. He's and the kind of testaments going on around about that gentleman, about Ali Raza Abdi, and from the quarters from which they have come, not just from the MQM, but from civil society. Zahir Qidwai posted something. I've had other, people from other parts of Pakistan posting things about how well they worked with him. So his murder becomes a little more, a little more present, a little more visible. And
it's more high profile.
Right, a higher profile, thank you. That's the word I was looking for. And beyond that, the financial emergency. So Sindh and Karachi particularly becomes a little tense. So what happens there is independent of what's also happening at the government. So we have this, as I often like to say, that race between the pressure cooker of tensions in Pakistani society and the system evolving and trying to fix itself. That race I can only see as picking up steam in 2019. So let's see where that goes.
So ladies and gentlemen, that was our show. Thank you, Sabahat. Thank you, Riaz. We have yet to see about the accountability. Is it going to be only with us? Certain people, certain parties, or it is going to be across the board. We will have to see that. So have a very happy New Year's. You all have a very blessed and very safe New Year 2019. So we will all be meeting in 2019. Thank you very much. This is your host, Misbah Azam. This is Viewpoint from Overseas. Thank you and good day.